What do you do when your entire belief system crumbles overnight? Everything that you believed in. And then you find out that what you believed in was not only bad, but possibly the worst thing that anybody's ever done in human history.
A lot of the students who came to see the piece, none of them had ever seen a piece of live theater. So for that to be the first piece of live theater they saw, it would have to be impactful because of the nature of the story being told.
As a community, we kind of learned new things and saw things from a perspective that perhaps we hadn't seen before.
The most incredible and just breathtaking way, it's honestly kind of indescribable unless you saw it.
It's got a whole hell of a lot to say, but it's just a play, and that was the thing I had to keep telling myself.
It definitely made us go to a new level of what theater can be, because it was such a powerful show with a real message instead of just theater for the sake of theater and theater for the sake of experience. It meant something, and that doesn't happen too often.
"20 years ago, when I first started thinking about it, I went to see the entire Ring cycle at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. 20 years went by, I'd sketched things and the play really wasn't coming into any kind of shape at all. I just can't sum up, it was a solid, probably 2 years of absolute total immersion kind of research. When I got onto the play as it exists now, I had almost forgotten about that original intent of belief systems falling apart. What really triggered it now was the idea that the world is so much controlled by ideology rather than rationality.
If you've not read the play, this takes place during the Nuremberg Trials. The Nuremberg Trials were the first trials, I think, ever in the history of humanity where there was people that were brought to justice for war crimes, crimes against humanity, actually, it was called. When I saw it, I was so incredibly impressed that I called Scott Irelan, who I had met, who was the new theater director at YSU, asked him as a favor if he would read this play, and he immediately got back to me and said, "We would like to perform this play."
And Sandy said, "Hey, my brother wrote this play. What do you think? You want to read it?" And I said, "Sure, send it to me. I'm always up for new plays." And that's how it started. And then once I read it, I took the script into our season selection process and sort of explained it to the faculty and said, "Here, we've got this new play. He's an alum. This would be important for our 50th anniversary." And it took about a year to work through that process, but we finally finalized it and put it on the season.
When we heard that we were going to be doing an original play that obviously hasn't been done anywhere before, everybody in the department got really excited. People were figuring out who might be able to play what role, and I went to the audition and did my thing, I guess, in the audition, and Tracy really liked it, so I ended up with the role, and I was really happy to be able to play Izzy in the show.
I guess the closest I could get to recreating that feeling would be to go, "Oh my God!" Because it was probably the craziest experience I've had in my whole life, just finding out that I was cast, and it was really surreal until I got to the first read-through.
Having it be a new play was really scary because we didn't want to mess it up because it was kind of this person's baby and it was the first time on stage. And having such a dramatic show too was really hard because I've done dramatic pieces but never anything real. And there's a difference between doing something dramatic and heavy and then being able to step out because it's fake. But this is hard because you step in and it's dramatic and awful and it really happened. So it's hard to step out and get back into a normal life.
Not only were we creating characters that had never seen life before, at least in a full production, but we were given so much freedom by our director just to feel it out and decide who they were as people.
With other roles, you get to look at other people's performances and at least decide what you want to use and what you don't. You have to find whatever you want to for inspiration. So I know as a cast, we watched a lot of Holocaust-related movies to try to find people and pieces that inspired us.
Every now and then, a couple nights after rehearsal when we were working on particularly heavy scenes, everybody was just trained after rehearsal. I felt like I had got run over by a truck. Not so much that even in the scenes we weren't expending a tremendous amount of energy to act, but just remaining in the mindset.
The structure of it provides some interesting challenges for actors. It's really filmic in the way that it moves from one scene to the next. And so there's some interesting acting choices that have to be made, directing choices that have to be made. And there's sort of a chorus of characters in the play around our main characters. The technical side of it, it provided some interesting ways to design in the space we were going to use. And so a lot of interesting, good educational moments.
The approach to both scenic and lighting design starts out in pretty much the same place. You read the script and you start working towards your script analysis, what the show is really about, and working with the rest of the creative team. But the other thing I started thinking about as I read through the story and looked at this imagery, especially after Nuremberg was bombed, I started thinking about the old black and white film noir look of that intense, exaggerated shadows, sharp highlights, really sculpting the body. Then you go into technical rehearsals, which means that I'm programming the lighting board, I'm working with the students that are calling cues and running the light board in order to make sure that things happen where they're supposed to create the kind of environment or mood that we want with each individual scene. So it's a long-term process.
There was one particular image that I came across as I was in that process of going between imagery and research and reading the play that showed a German woman who was being walked through a field of corpses that had been exhumed after the war was over and we had kind of discovered all of the terrible things that had gone on. And there was a sense of gruesome revelation in this image, and I felt like it depicted the action of the play. The design became about revealing the grotesque nature of what could happen, and the power of myth, the way that myth blinds us to the humanity of other people. By showing the blood and the guts, quite literally, in some of the costume designs, we were able to create a sense of horror and recreate that sense of horror that I saw in the woman's face in that image.
A lot of people experienced this play. A lot of people learned things that they never knew before. A lot of people seem to have started to think about things in ways they hadn't thought about them before. The cast and crew in particular, when I spoke to them after the show, seemed to have gone through a very profound experience, which for me is more than flattering and gratifying. I mean, it was kind of unexpected.
I did have two Jewish characters, and my father's Jewish, so I'm Jewish, and I've seen a lot of family members and people who are very deeply affected by this. My grandfather escaped from Poland. So it was just an interesting connection that I've never been forced to make before. And it was a little jarring, actually, to have to step into that, but definitely a good experience.
It doesn't specify in the script where Izzy's from or ethnicity or anything like that. But I'm 100% Polish. My grandparents are all from Poland, and a lot of the atrocities that happened in the Holocaust took place in Poland. My grandfather was in a German POW camp. It was things along those lines, maybe forced similarities just to make myself feel more connected to it.
The overall message of the show is just so powerful, and it hits you right in the gut. Like, I really, really hope it becomes a full-scale play, somewhere huge.
I can't tell you the number of people that came up to me after the play, both Jewish and non-Jewish, by the way. And most of them, I would tell you, came up to me afterwards and said, why doesn't he take this to Broadway? It was such an outstanding play, and it was.
As a playwright, I don't necessarily want the audience to walk out thinking, oh, he said this. I want them to be questioning everything themselves. And I don't even want that to happen ideally for hours or days afterwards, because immediately it should be an emotional experience. I think that Dr. Irelan really deserves a lot of credit for being willing to take a chance on an unproven script. And I hope that YSU does that more and more in the future.
I would hope that we would actually move in a direction where we do more scripts on our season, 2 a year, that are newly developed, newly written. And it would be ideal that one of those scripts would be a student-generated piece from the group here at Youngstown. You can learn some things by doing Shaw, you can learn some things by doing the Greeks, but we're so far removed from those scripts that it's actually more valuable to work on new texts and understand how some of those historical influences find their way into a new text, and what does it mean to work on that and move it from sort of a stale 2-dimensional piece on the page into a living 3-dimensional piece.
Students who went to see it, I was shocked at how little history they actually knew. Some of my students that are older than average would say they were sitting in the show and people would go, is this World War I or World War II? Because they were just totally unfamiliar with the Holocaust. And I think to let people recognize a history of what's past and understand that these kinds of things really can happen, people aren't making it up, has an extraordinary impact in terms of their ability to judge what's real and what's not in the political world now.
Truthfully, the greatest impact was when we had a performance with the Jewish Community Center. And we packed out the house, and there were so many people there, and just to see the impact that it had on them, people that were deeply personally invested in the story that was being told, was very significant for me.
I was very grateful to be given the opportunity to play Izzy Borowitz in Mickey Kessler's Tribunal. It was a great experience. Everybody involved, I think, did a fantastic job. They did what they needed to do, and I think the final product spoke for itself.
I'm very proud at how it plays out theatrically. I think when it works well. Thematically, I'm very proud of how more and more that's being reflected in the characters and the action, rather than in the earlier drafts. It was clearly the writer on his soapbox taking a stand on things. But now more and more I think it's coming out in the action and in the characters, and the characters are shaping themselves accordingly, I think. And so I'm rather proud of it. I hope it has some life to it.